The shot echoed across the quiet suburban street. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Washington's body crumpling to the pavement beside his car. Officer Reece Dalton stood over him, gun still smoking, face twisted with contempt at the decorated soldier, who'd done nothing but ask why he'd been pulled over. "Just another thug who doesn't know his place," Dalton muttered, holstering his weapon. What he didn't know, Lieutenant Colonel Washington wasn't just any black man in uniform. He was the Pentagon's Director of Special Operations, with direct lines to generals, senators, and the White House itself. And in the next 72 hours, every privilege that protected Dalton would disintegrate beneath him. Stick around. What you're about to witness will leave you speechless. If you believe in accountability, hit like and subscribe right now. Only those who turn a blind eye to injustice would not subscribe. Arlington, Virginia shimmered under the early autumn sun, its tree-lined streets and ordered neighborhoods a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on Lexington Drive. The neat rows of colonial homes and manicured lawns seemed to hold their breath as emergency lights flashed against brick facades. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Washington lay motionless on the asphalt, his military ID fallen just inches from his outstretched hand. At 45, he carried himself with the quiet dignity that came from 22 years of military service. 3 tours in Afghanistan, a Bronze Star, and now a senior position at the Pentagon coordinating special operations across 3 continents. His pressed uniform pants and polished shoes were now stained with spreading crimson. Officer Reece Dalton stood over him, radio in hand, calling for backup rather than medical assistance. At 34, Dalton was Arlington PD's problem child. Transferred. Twice, subject of 6 civilian complaints, but always protected by the thin blue line that seemed impenetrable in this jurisdiction. His service record was a gallery of warning signs that nobody had taken seriously. Washington had been driving home from the Pentagon, a 5-minute detour to pick up anniversary flowers for his wife. The dash cam would later show he'd used his turn signal properly, stayed under the speed limit, done absolutely nothing to warrant being pulled over. Yet Dalton had hit the lights anyway. "License and registration," witnesses heard him demand, before adding, "Boy." Washington had identified himself calmly as an Army officer, reached slowly for his wallet. "I don't care if you're Colin Powell," Dalton had sneered. "Hands where I can see them." Then came the shot. No warning. No justification. As Washington's blood pooled on the street, Dalton's partner arrived in a second squad car, face going pale at the scene before him. "What the hell happened?" he whispered. Dalton didn't look up, busy securing the scene like this was a drug bust instead of a shooting. He reached. I reacted. The partner stared at the military ID card on the ground, then at the flowers scattered across the pavement. "Jesus Christ, Reece! Do you have any idea who you just shot? Have you ever witnessed power used against the wrong person? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe in accountability, hit like and subscribe." "Get that ID," Dalton barked, gesturing to the card on the ground. "We need to process this perp." His partner didn't move, eyes locked on the Pentagon access, badge visible in Washington's breast pocket. "That's a Pentagon clearance, Reece. Level Alpha. This isn't just some random—" "I don't give a damn where he works," Dalton interrupted, voice rising. He made a threatening move. By now neighbors had emerged, phones recording everything. A woman in scrubs knelt beside Washington, checking for a pulse. "He's still alive," she shouted. "We need an ambulance, now!" Dalton hesitated, then keyed, his radio without urgency. Subject is still responsive. Request medical. The partner's face hardened. "That's Lieutenant Colonel Washington. My brother served under him in Kandahar. Dalton finally paused, confusion flickering across his face. "He's basically a hero," the partner added quietly, "and you just put him down like a dog." What would you do if you saw someone abuse their authority? Would you step in or stay silent? Drop your answer below. Also hit like and subscribe. Chakryun. "Don't understand the situation," Dalton insisted, voice tight as the crowd grew. He was combative, refusing orders. A man stepped forward, phone raised. "I recorded everything," he said. He wasn't combative. He identified himself as military. Dalton lunged forward. "Hand over that phone." But his partner stepped between them. "Reece, stand down," he hissed. "There are a dozen cameras on us. Right now." Sirens wailed in the distance as an ambulance approached. The woman in scrubs maintained pressure on Washington's wound, her white coat splattered with crimson evidence. "Pulse is weakening," she called out. "Where's that damn ambulance?" Dalton's expression shifted, from anger to something more dangerous. Calculation. He clicked his body cam, which should have been recording from the start. "For the record," he announced loudly. "Suspect appeared to reach for a weapon." The partner stared in disbelief. "Are you seriously trying to cover this now? Your camera should have been on the entire time." Dalton lowered his voice. "Listen, Jones, you back me up here or what?" Jones stepped back, physically distancing himself from Dalton. "I'm not lying for you. Not this time." The ambulance screeched to a halt. Paramedics rushed to Washington's side, working with urgent precision. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Washington's eyes flickered open, clear, focused, and looking directly at Dalton. The officer's face drained of color. "I did nothing," Washington whispered, words barely audible but caught by the nearest phone's microphone. Then the stretcher was loaded, doors slammed, and the ambulance tore away toward Arlington Medical Center. Dalton turned to see 3 more police cars arriving, but something was different. An unmarked black SUV pulled in behind them. A man in a suit stepped out, flanked by 2 MPs in military police uniforms. "Officer Dalton?" The suited man approached, badge already extended. "I'm Special Agent Mercer, Pentagon Investigations Division." Jones stepped back as if distancing himself from radioactive material. "We're going to need your weapon, your badge, and a full statement." Mercer's voice was ice. "Lieutenant Colonel, Washington is the Director of Special Operations for the Joint Chiefs. The Secretary of Defense has been notified." Dalton's hand instinctively moved toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Mercer said quietly. "Those gentlemen behind me are Delta Force, MPs assigned to Colonel Washington's security detail. They're rather upset." The 2 military police officers stood at parade rest, expressions rigid with controlled fury. Dalton swallowed hard. "This is a local police matter. You have no jurisdiction." "Actually," Mercer smiled without warmth, "when you shot a Pentagon official on American soil, you made it federal. Your jurisdiction just evaporated. If you were standing in Washington's shoes, would you pursue justice or forgiveness? Comment your choice below. And if you stand for real accountability, like and subscribe now." "Officer Dalton," Agent Mercer continued, "I'll ask one more time for your service weapon." Dalton's hand trembled slightly. "I was doing my job." He matched a suspect description. "What suspect description?" Jones interrupted, shaking his head. "Dispatch. Never sent one." "Stand by me here," Dalton hissed at his partner. Jones removed his own body cam and held it out to Mercer. "My camera was running the entire incident. I arrived 30 seconds after the shot." Dalton's face contorted. "You treacherous—" "Enough!" Mercer raised his hand. "Officer Dalton, Your weapon. Now." The crowd had grown, dozens of phones recording every moment. Dalton looked around, realizing there would be no private resolution. Whatever happened next would play out in full public view. With visible reluctance, he unholstered his gun, holding it by the barrel. "And now we'll need your phone," Mercer added. "My personal phone? You have no right." "We have every right. We're investigating potential hate crimes against a high-ranking military officer." "Hate crimes?" Dalton's voice rose. "This is ridiculous. I'm not racist. I was responding to a threat." From the gathered crowd, someone held up a phone. "He called the colonel boy before he even checked his ID. I recorded it." Another voice joined in. "He didn't call for medical help until forced." Mercer took Dalton's weapon, passing it to one of the MPs. "We're also accessing your department emails, texts, and social media history as we speak." For the first time, real fear flashed across Dalton's face. "Officer Dalton," Mercer said, voice carrying to the crowd and cameras, "would you have shot a white lieutenant colonel who reached for his military ID?" Dalton couldn't answer. The silence stretched like a confession across Lexington Drive. If someone crossed a line they couldn't take back, would you call them out? Or let the world decide? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. "Detain him!" Mercer ordered the MPs, who moved with swift precision. "Read him his rights. This investigation is now under federal jurisdiction." The handcuffs clicked around Dalton's wrists, cold steel that had so often been his tool now becoming his restraint. "You can't do this," he protested weakly. "Police union will—" "Your union representative has already been contacted," Mercer cut him off. "As has the FBI Civil Rights Division. This case has been elevated to the highest levels." Jones watched silently as his former partner was secured, then stepped forward. "Sir, I'd like to provide my full statement. There have been previous incidents with Officer Dalton that may be relevant." Mercer nodded. "We'll take your statement at headquarters." As Dalton was led toward the unmarked SUV, his radio crackled to life. The Arlington police chief's voice came through, sounding strained. "All units be advised. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Washington is in surgery. The Pentagon has established a security cordon at Arlington Medical. This incident is now classified as a matter of national security." Dalton stumbled slightly, reality crashing down on him. This wasn't going away. No union protection, no paid leave while things quieted down, no internal investigation that would clear him. "Your dash cam and body cam footage have already been secured by federal agents at the precinct," Mercer informed him, "along with your departmental records." "This wasn't about race," Dalton insisted desperately. "You're making this political." Mercer leaned close, voice low but razor-sharp. "No, Officer Dalton. You made it criminal when you shot an unarmed senior military officer conducting routine business in his own neighborhood. The evidence will determine if it was also about race." The SUV door closed on Dalton's protests, silencing him as effectively as he had tried to silence Washington. When everyone's watching, would you keep pushing for truth? Or let it go? What would you do? Share your decision in the comments. Also, hit like and subscribe. The Pentagon briefing room hummed with tension. Every major network had cameras. Trained on the podium where General Richard Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, approached the microphone. His four-star insignia caught the light as he adjusted his papers. "At 17:32 hours yesterday," Hayes began, voice steady but edged with controlled anger. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Washington, Director of Special Operations and a decorated combat veteran with 22 years of service to this nation, was shot during a routine traffic stop in Arlington, Virginia. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Colonel Washington remains in critical condition. Doctors are cautiously optimistic. Hayes paused, jaw tightening. The Department of Defense has initiated a full investigation in coordination with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and the FBI. A reporter called out, "General, is it true the officer involved has a history of racial complaints?" "I will not comment on an ongoing investigation," Hayes replied. "However, I can confirm that Officer Reece Dalton is currently in federal custody and has been charged with attempted murder of a federal officer and civil rights violations." The room erupted with questions. Hayes raised his hand for silence. The United States military stands for honor, integrity, and service. Our personnel, all our personnel, deserve to come home safely, whether from battlefields abroad or the streets of their own neighborhoods. His voice hardened. When someone who has risked their life repeatedly for this country cannot safely drive home in uniform, we have failed as a nation. Screens behind him illuminated with Washington's service photo, alongside images of his bronze star and Purple Heart. "Make no mistake," Hayes concluded. "The full weight of the United States government will ensure justice in this case. That is all. Would you let injustice slide if it kept the peace? Or would you risk everything to call it out? Share your choice in the comments. Like and subscribe if you believe silence is never the answer. The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. stood imposing against the gray sky, its columns and steps crowded with journalists and protesters. Signs reading, "Justice for Lieutenant Colonel Washington" and "End Qualified Immunity" waved alongside American flags and military service banners. Inside courtroom 3, Reece Dalton sat beside his lawyer, no longer in uniform, but in an orange jumpsuit that seemed to drain the color from his face. The judge, a stern-faced veteran of the federal bench, peered down at him over reading glasses. "The charges against you are extremely serious, Mr. Dalton," she began. "Attempted murder of a federal officer, deprivation of civil rights under color of law resulting in bodily injury, and obstruction of justice." Dalton's attorney rose. "Your Honor, my client maintains these charges are excessive. He was performing his duties as a law enforcement officer." "Save it for trial," the judge cut him off. "We're here to determine bail." The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, stood next. "Your Honor, the government strongly opposes any bail. The evidence against Mr. Dalton is overwhelming, including multiple video recordings, from witnesses, dashboard cameras, and his partner's body camera." She placed a folder on the bench. Furthermore, a search of the defendant's home computer revealed extensive participation in racist online forums, and text messages with fellow officers showing a pattern of targeting black motorists. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Additionally," she continued, "we've uncovered 17 previous complaints against Officer Dalton for excessive force, 14 of which involved black citizens. All were dismissed without investigation." Dalton's attorney jumped up. "Your Honor, my client's personal views, however distasteful, are protected by the First Amendment, and previous complaints are irrelevant to this case." "They speak to pattern and intent," the prosecutor countered, "and they certainly speak to flight risk and danger to the community." The judge studied the documents before her, then looked directly at Dalton. "Bail denied. The defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial." As Dalton was led away, his expression shifted from shock to rage. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted. "If he'd just followed orders." The judge banged her gavel. "Remove the defendant." Outside the courthouse, Washington's wife, Teresa, stood at a podium, surrounded by military colleagues in full-dress uniform. A Pentagon spokesperson handed her a microphone. "My husband has spent his life serving this country," she said, voice steady despite her visible exhaustion. "He survived 3 combat tours only to be shot on American soil, in our neighborhood, while buying me anniversary flowers." She paused, composure momentarily slipping. "Marcus is still fighting. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical." Her gaze hardened. "But I want to be clear. This isn't just about Marcus. It's about every person of color who lives in fear during routine traffic stops. It's about accountability." Behind her, a general nodded solemnly. "The Pentagon has provided us with security, legal support, and full access to military medical facilities," she continued. "But what about those without such resources? Who speaks for them?" As Teresa stepped away, reporters shouted questions about rumors of Dalton's alleged online activities. The Pentagon spokesperson returned to the microphone. "We can confirm that federal investigators have uncovered disturbing evidence of Officer Dalton's involvement with white nationalist groups online. Screenshots of his posts have been submitted to the court. This appears to be a hate crime, plain and simple." As rain began to fall, the crowd held their ground, umbrellas blooming like black flowers around the courthouse steps. This was no longer just one case. It had become a reckoning. What would you do if the whole room watched you bring someone to justice? Stay strong or show mercy? Let's talk about it also. Hit like and subscribe. 4 days after the shooting, Lieutenant Colonel Washington opened his eyes. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft sound of his wife Teresa dozing in a chair beside him. 2 military police officers stood guard outside his door. Washington's first conscious thought was clear. He remembered everything. When the doctors confirmed his stability, federal agents arrived within the hour. Their questions were direct, their recorders running as Washington recounted every detail of the encounter. The unnecessary stop, Dalton's immediate hostility, the slur, the shot fired despite his slow, announced movements. "Sir," the lead agent said carefully, "your testimony is crucial. Without it, Dalton's defense could create reasonable doubt." Washington nodded slowly, pain evident with each movement. "I understand." After the agents left, General Hayes himself visited, standing at attention beside Washington's bed before taking a seat. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I want you to know something. There's pressure to handle this quietly. Offers of a settlement that would avoid trial, full medical coverage, promotion to colonel, substantial damages." Washington's gaze hardened. In exchange for what? Less specific testimony, acknowledging possible misunderstanding rather than intent. A heavy silence filled the room. "The secretary himself instructed me to tell you that your career will not be affected either way," Hayes continued. "This is entirely your decision, but the system prefers resolution over exposure." Washington looked at his sleeping wife, then at the bandages covering his chest. Finally, he turned back to Hayes. "With respect, sir," he said softly but firmly, "I didn't serve this country for 22 years to sell out its principles when they're inconvenient. I'll testify to exactly what happened. No settlements." Hayes nodded, something like pride flickering across his face. "I told them that's what you'd say. Would you show mercy to someone who never showed you respect? Or would you let the consequences do the talking? Let us know in the comments. Also, like and subscribe." The courtroom fell silent as Lieutenant Colonel Washington entered, walking slowly but under his own power. His uniform was impeccable, every medal and ribbon perfectly placed, his posture military straight, despite the visible pain each step caused him. At the prosecution table, the Justice Department team rose respectfully. At the defense table, Dalton's eyes widened, as if facing Washington in the flesh somehow made the reality of his actions impossible to deny. Washington took the oath with his right hand raised, then settled carefully into the witness stand. When asked to identify the man who shot him, he pointed directly at Dalton without hesitation. "Could you describe the events of October 12th? In your own words, Colonel?" the prosecutor asked. Washington's testimony was devastating in its precision. He recalled every word, every action with military exactitude. He described Dalton's immediate hostility, the racial slur, the refusal to acknowledge his military ID. "I moved slowly," Washington explained. "I announced each movement before making it. I'm reaching for my wallet now." That's standard procedure we teach soldiers when interacting with authorities in tense situations. "And what happened then?" the prosecutor asked. Officer Dalton drew his weapon and fired. One shot. Center. Mass. No warning. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination, immediately aggressive. "Isn't it true you refused to comply with Officer Dalton's commands?" "No, sir. I complied fully while verbally identifying myself as a military officer." "And isn't it possible Officer Dalton believed you were reaching for a weapon?" Washington fixed the lawyer with a steady gaze. "Sir, I was in uniform pants and a button-down shirt. My hands were visible. I announced my movements. There was no reasonable basis for that belief." The defense shifted tactics. "Colonel Washington, have you ever experienced combat stress? Made split-second decisions under pressure?" "I have 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. I've made life-or-death decisions under enemy fire." "Then surely you can understand how an officer might react when—" "Objection!" The prosecutor stood. "The witness is not on trial here." "Sustained," the judge ruled. Washington leaned forward slightly. "May I address this question, Your Honor?" The judge nodded. Washington turned to the jury. "In combat, we operate under strict rules of engagement. If I had shot an unarmed civilian who posed no threat, I would be court-martialed. No soldier gets to claim 'I was afraid' as justification for taking an innocent life." He looked directly at Dalton. "The uniform, whether military or police, demands more from us, not less. It requires control, judgment, and discipline. Without those, it's just a costume covering the same prejudices Officer Dalton brought to our encounter." The courtroom remained completely silent when he finished speaking. "If someone crossed the line and humiliated you, would you have forgiven them? Or made sure the world saw what they did?" Drop your take in the comments. Also hit like and subscribe. The verdict came after just 4 hours of deliberation. On the count of attempted murder of a federal officer, we find the defendant, Reece Dalton, guilty. Dalton's shoulders slumped. On the count of deprivation of civil rights under color of law resulting in bodily injury, we find the defendant guilty. Teresa Washington gripped her husband's hand. On the count of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom remained eerily quiet. No outbursts, no celebrations, just the weight of justice finally being served. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later drew even more attention. Lieutenant Colonel Washington sat in the front row, now recovered, enough to sit without visible discomfort. Behind him sat rows of uniformed military personnel, soldiers from his command, fellow officers, even General Hayes himself. Judge Eleanor Simmons studied Dalton for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Dalton, you have been convicted of extremely serious crimes. Before I pronounce sentence, you have the right to address this court. Do you wish to do so?" Dalton stood, slowly. His time in custody had aged him. His face gaunt, his posture defeated. "Your Honor," he began, voice hoarse, "I want to say that I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just doing my job, as I understood it." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "I admit I made a mistake," Dalton continued. "I reacted based on training and instinct. But I'm not a racist. I'm not a murderer. I'm just a cop who made a split-second decision that went wrong." Judge Simmons waited until he finished, then leaned forward. "Mr. Dalton, I've reviewed every piece of evidence in this case. I've read the thousands of your online posts expressing racist views. I've seen the text, messages celebrating previous misconduct toward black citizens. I've examined the 17 prior complaints against you." Her voice hardened. This was not a split-second decision gone wrong. This was the inevitable culmination of a career built on bias and abuse of power. She straightened. "The law entrusted you with extraordinary authority, the power to detain, to arrest, even to use deadly force. In return, it demanded responsibility, judgment, and equal treatment under law. You violated that trust in the most fundamental way possible." Silence fell as she prepared to deliver the sentence. "Reece Dalton, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, without possibility of parole." As Dalton was led away, Lieutenant Colonel Washington stood. Their eyes met briefly across the courtroom, Dalton's hollow with defeat, Washington's steady with something more complex than triumph. It wasn't celebration on Washington's face. It was resolution, the grim satisfaction of a necessary mission completed. Some say forgiveness is strength. Others say it's surrender. If you were the judge today, would you forgive the antagonist or let him face justice fully? Tell us below. Like and subscribe too. 6 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Washington stood at a podium at West Point. His new eagles, the insignia of a full colonel, gleamed on his shoulders. Behind him sat rows of cadets, their young faces serious as they absorbed his words. "The uniform demands more from us," he told them, echoing his testimony. "Whether military or law enforcement, it represents not just authority, but responsibility, not just power, but accountability." He gestured to the scar visible at his collar. "This isn't just about one officer or one incident. It's about the system we build together, the standards we uphold." Washington's voice strengthened. "Justice doesn't require vengeance, but it always requires truth. When you stand for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous, you honor this uniform more than any battlefield victory ever could." The cadets rose as one, their applause like thunder, not for revenge served, but for principles preserved. If you enjoyed today's story, like, share, and subscribe for more justice stories like this.